to make a statement to the House. On Saturday last, at column 658, the Leader of the House rose on a point of order to announce the government's intention to bring forward a motion today under Section 13(1)(b) of the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018. Unfortunately, the point of order did not prove to be a prelude to an emergency business statement on which colleagues could question, probe and scrutinise the Leader. Rather, for approximately an hour, 30 points of order were raised by no fewer than 24 colleagues, with me expressing disquiet and consternation that the government intended to require the House to consider again on Monday the same matter which it had decided 48 hours earlier on the immediately preceding sitting day. It was my privilege to listen and respond to the views of colleagues. I then undertook to reflect further on what members had said and to give a ruling this afternoon, which I shall now do. There are two issues, one of substance and the other of circumstances, to consider. I shall address each in turn. First, I have to judge whether the motion tabled under Section 13(1)(b) of the 2018 Act for debate today is the same in substance as that which was decided on Saturday. Page 397 of Erskine May is clear that such a motion may not be brought forward again during that same session. It is equally clear that adjudication of cases is a matter for the Chair. I invoked Erskine May and ruled on this issue as recently as March the 18th this year. Saturday's motion sought approval for the withdrawal agreement, the political declaration on the future relationship between the EU and the UK, and the declaration concerning the operation of the democratic consent in Northern Ireland provision. Today's motion seeks approval for the withdrawal agreement, the political declaration on the future relationship between the EU and the UK, and the declaration concerning the operation of the democratic consent in Northern Ireland provision. It is clear that the motions are in substance the same. However, this matter was decided fewer than 49 hours ago. After more than 3 hours of debate, the House voted by 322 to 306 for Sir Oliver Letwin's amendment, which stated that, and I quote, "This House has considered the matter but withholds approval unless and until implementing legislation is passed," unquote. The second matter for me to consider was whether there had been any change of circumstances that would justify asking the House to reconsider on Monday what it had decided on Saturday. On the face of it, unless an event or development external to the House had interceded, it is hard to see a significant change of circumstances that would warrant a reconsideration on the next sitting day. In this case, a reconsideration pre-announced by the Leader of the House just under 21 minutes after the result of the division was announced. However, the government might argue, though to date it hasn't put forward any argument or explanation at all, that the change of circumstances is the Prime Minister's application on Saturday night for an extension of Article 50. This is not persuasive. The application is... This is not persuasive. The application is part of a process rather than a significant event in itself. In summary, today's motion is... I'm extraordinarily grateful to the honourable gentleman. If he'd bear stoically and with fortitude, I shall complete my statement. In summary, today's motion is in substance the same as Saturday's motion, and the House has decided the matter. Today's circumstances are in substance the same as Saturday's circumstances. My ruling is therefore that the motion will not be debated today, as it would be repetitive and disorderly to do so. For the benefit of colleagues not closely familiar with the so-called same question convention, which is very strong and dates back to 1604, I will summarise the rationale for it in a sentence. It is a necessary rule to ensure the sensible use of the House's time and proper respect for the decisions that it takes.
Boris Johnson has just lost again. Bercow prevents the vote that Johnson wanted to make today, on Monday. If you remember, on quote-unquote Super Saturday, Johnson was supposed to get his vote. The Ledwin Amendment comes in play that essentially, as he describes it, the House withholds the meaningful vote until legislation has been completed. Meaning, it's not enough to get Parliament to say, yes, we would vote for this. No, they want the legislation completed. They could trip over the October 31st deadline without having the legislation for Brexit completed. They want Brexit completed in total before they get their meaningful vote at the end of the process. Bercow, even though he was attacked for this ruling, it's not wrong for this ruling, and he's consistent. Think back to Theresa May. If you remember, if you remember, Theresa May continued to bring her bill back over and over and over again in order to force Parliament to vote for her bill. Parliament voted it down in historic measures on the first count, voted it down in major numbers on the second count, and after a while, Bercow says, no, we're not going to do this. Logic is sound. If Parliament and the rulings of Parliament is to have any gravity at all, any substance at all, to have a vote to continuously being brought back over and over and over again completely denigrates any notion that Parliament's will is Parliament's will. It has gravity, it's substance. And for you to bring the vote back over and over again undermines that principle. He was consistent. Boris Johnson, within less than an hour, says, we're going to put it on Monday. The catch here is the Ledwin Amendment is now law, meaning BoJo had to go send and beg for an extension. Boris Johnson did not sign his name to that document, and he sent the secondary document and a tertiary document, essentially destroying any notion of the first document. Yes, he did beg for an extension. He photocopied what they put into the BENAC and just sent it. And then he sent a secondary document. Now, there's nothing to say that BoJo can't send a secondary document. There's nothing to say that he can't call all individual leaders and tell them to ignore the first document. Yes, you could say it breaks the spirit of the BENAC, but law is not necessarily entirely spirit. There's technicalities to it, and he is not breaching the technicalities of it. Can't get a break. Boris Johnson is not going to get the meaningful vote until the legislation is done in full. Now, they are rushing this through and trying to get this done next week, essentially. This week, like Thursday, having this kind of super late night sessions of Parliament in order to try to get his bill through. And interestingly enough, so apparently he has the numbers. He also, however, has to fight off all of these amendments and everything else that people are going to put to this bill in order to try to extend the timeline of him so he can trip over the deadline. But again, he has already had to beg the EU for an extension. It is unclear or not whether or not the EU is going to give that extension because it is up to the EU to give the extension. And the Parliament can't assume that all of the member states will give that extension, meaning it is very possible that it is Boris Johnson's bill or no bill. It is unclear, however, on whether or not that's going to be the case. I suspect that the EU will make a decision on that sooner rather than later because, again, they leave on October 31st. Last point. If I am the opposition, I would put through legislation that says, by law, Boris Johnson has to sign that document and that it is not enough for him to send a document without the signature on it. The signature makes it official. He needs to sign the document. I will force him by law to do so. I mean, after all, let's be honest, all of this has been to some degree about a lot of politics. I mean, in the sense of opposition, which is effectively a Remainer party, meaning Labour, trying to stop BoJo from getting his Brexit, knowing that if BoJo does what he said he's going to do, any notion of an election is going to go to BoJo. He did what he said he was going to do. It's never easy. And right now, BoJo can't get his vote. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he won't try to ram this through this week. There are only 10 days left. Last point, I want to reiterate. Bercow is right. Now, I have been pro-Brexit only because the referendum said leave. It's a referendum. It's a election of sorts. And it's an election from the standpoint of direct democracy. What does the public want? And you can make the argument that the public didn't know what Brexit was. They knew it was taking back control of borders and all that stuff. You can say the public chose for wrong reasons. That doesn't really mean anything. People vote for wrong reasons all the time, even in electing officials. Whatever the reason the public, even if it was just outright discontent in a class sense, they made a choice. You need to respect the choice. The Remainers have not wanted to respect the choice. I've been against that. You're supposed to leave. You may come up with a soft Brexit, but it should be a Brexit. So it can't be that I am pro-Remainer at heart, in which case I'm making this argument. No, I'm making this argument because for me, I look at this as if I'm looking down on something and see people just acting in somewhat of a bubble. Not in a bubble, acting in their best interest, meaning there are things that they want to accomplish and fight for those things. But within the context of that, based on the rule set, it's either true or false that it breaks it or doesn't. I'm calling balls and strikes. That's my point. Bercow's not wrong. Bercow is consistent, and I agree with Bercow. Boris Johnson, within less than an hour, can't say we're going to have a meaningful vote on Monday when the Letwin Act literally says this parliament will withhold its meaningful vote until the legislation is completed. The legislation hasn't been completed. Nothing has fundamentally changed that would allow a vote like this to take place. There is no reason for this vote to take place. The entire reasoning behind it is because Boris Johnson wants to rush this and ram this through in order to get his win. It is not Bercow's responsibility to help BoJo get his win. It is Bercow's responsibility to ensure that A, the rule set is met, but even in a higher sense, that Britain is not fucked over by a prime minister that essentially is more interested in getting out than necessarily attending to the process of law. Bercow's doing his job. That's my point. And again, this is from somebody who agrees with the premise of Brexit. How on earth are you going to vote for this kind of withdrawal grill when you need time to scrutinize and figure out what's in the bill? I think that's absolutely true. So I don't necessarily, again, think Bercow is wrong. The goal of Parliament is not to rush through the bill. I hope you understand my point. Yes, Brexit, agreed. But the goal of it is not to rush through the bill. All of these people are going to get their opportunity to look through this bill as they should be able to look through the bill. I don't even think a couple of days is enough time. But fair enough. They want to get it done by October 31st. I can't begrudge the government for doing that. However, other forces within the government are not wrong for giving due diligence in regards to scrutiny. Let's be clear. Labour at this point is a Remain party. Their policy makes no sense. We're going to negotiate for a deal, and then we're going to vote against our own deal that we ourselves just want to negotiate. That is a ludicrous proposition. And that is literally Labour's position. BoJo is very clear in what he wants. And believe it or not, all of these pushbacks, mishaps, all of these failures have not weakened him in the eye of the public. It makes him look that much stronger. The public is willing to back BoJo's deal. At the very least, it looks pretty much even in regards to whether they would or the way it wouldn't, meaning if they put it up for a second referendum. Labor is pushing for a second referendum at this point in regards to the other forces. The question becomes, is there enough votes in Parliament for it? Up to this point, there hasn't been. It looks, however, it honestly looks like BoJo still may get this through despite the pushbacks and despite the mishaps. They're going to have a vote on whether or not to vote and set the agenda coming up for next week and trying to get this bill completed and through by October 31st. Bercow has said, look, this can be done and the House is willing to work with you on it. So it's not like he's disallowing it. His point is, we decided this on Saturday. Why are you bringing this back on Monday? How is he wrong? How is he wrong? There's some Brexiteers that might be pissed off at him, but how is he wrong? Like, share, subscribe.